What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Hello, this is Eric Froton with JD Yonke and Josh Chevalier once again for the CFF All Access podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. Please remember to hit the like and subscribe button. I always forget to do that until the end. I finally got that out in the beginning here. For our opener for today's show, we decided we wanted to go through the best offenses that we expected to not be that prolific in the preseason. So we're going to go by points scored, better passing offenses than we expected, as well as better rushing offenses. And I think any of us expected, well, heading into the season, which is why we probably don't have enough of these guys on our teams. Of course, that might not be the case for our boy JD. It is probably the case for me. Purple Rain, our boy Joe Arpazzi. I think I got that one this time. I said his name wrong last time. My boy Joe, thank you, my brother. Always love Purple Rain. And our boys over there with Volume Pigs. Him and Volume Pigs share and do an excellent waiver wire column. You should both check that out. But in the meantime, we're going to get over to our teams that I didn't expect to see scoring 35 plus points. So that was kind of the cutoff that I used. We went for teams that are scoring 35 points or more, which, if you read my preseason articles, that is generally the benchmark we're looking for prolific teams. We have 27 teams that are over the 35-point threshold. So out of 135, we only got 25 teams that are really hitting that elite mark. The number one team, in my opinion, that I did not expect to be amongst this elite group of 35-point per game offenses is the second overall offense, none other than the Indiana Hoosiers, of course. 46.6 points per game, second most in the country. I mean, we've waxed poetic, I think, quite a bit on Mr. Cignetti about how he just raided the coffers of the entire Sun Belt Conference. If you looked at the all Sun Belt team, Cignetti took all those guys that he coached against, and he coached, obviously, at James Madison and brought them all over to Indiana. Elijah Surratt has been prolific. Obviously, we've talked on this show a couple times about Justice Ellison, Tyson Lawson, and, of course, Curtis Rourke. So, guys, gentlemen, anything about the Indiana team? Did you see it coming and I didn't? Or, any comments, questions about that?
Yeah, for me, I thought this would be a second year rebuild type deal where they were good in 2025 and be able to get their pieces, because we know Curt Cignetti has a good offense. But look, like, we haven't seen Curtis Rourke be good in like 2 or 3 years. So, and they're bringing a bunch of kids from JMU and Justice Ellison from Wake Forest. So there's a lot of pieces that hadn't produced at other places, or they had produced at a lower level. And the Big Ten is a big step up. So I really thought it would take them a couple years to get there, but clearly they proved me wrong. What about you, JD?
Yeah, no, definitely didn't see it coming. I don't think anybody saw it coming to this extent. Like, you can buy into Cignetti, and then there's buying into this, which I don't think anybody had 46 points per game when the season almost over in the bingo cards. And yeah, Rourke, again, he's a guy, like I tweeted out in the past, like, I think he's an NFL quarterback. Like, I think it's been very clear this guy was like way too talented for the MAC for a long time, but like, he wasn't even close to healthy last year. Like, I overdrafted him last year in the MAC. It didn't happen. And now he's got a bunch of, former non-power conference guys thrown to, I didn't think so. So I thought obviously they could be successful and be a winning team, but do this offensively, not at all.
No, absolutely. We'll round out a few of the other top teams. Obviously, want to mention the number one scoring team in the nation, which is 47.4 points per game of the Miami Hurricanes. I think we probably expected that, but some other sleepers. That is kind of a sleeper. I expect Miami to be leading the league in points, certainly, but we'll go with 8th overall. The Tulane Green Wave in the midst of the Willie Fritz departure for Houston. We've seen Houston definitely not scoring many points. And I think we expected Tulane to be at least more up-tempo. You can't get less up-tempo than Willie Fritz, but God, I mean, I full disclosure, I didn't see 39.8 points per game out of Tulane, even with the AAC offenses that which would be the defenses, in our preseason show, Zach Hall did a great job of identifying how poor those defenses are in the American Athletic Conference. We He put out that spreadsheet where I believe Tulsa had the worst in terms of they're facing the worst set of defenses on their schedule, and that's AAC. I want to say like 5 out of the bottom 15 teams were AAC teams, and that is something that certainly Tulane has feasted on. I'll domino a few more. Clemson is 9th in the country at 39.4 points per game. We talked about, certainly coming into the season, how just decimated that wide receiver core was last year. Clearly, with Klubnik taking a step and having a full staff, that's made a difference. Army and Navy, obviously. I mean, we have to mention Army and Navy. 38 points per game, 14th in the country for Army, 18th in the country for Navy. They have 37.5, just a tick behind. And then 2 more teams. BYU is 24th in the country at 35 points per game. And the aforementioned previously New Mexico, we talked about off air, 34.8 points per game. They are 26th. I rounded that up. Gentlemen, any of those teams that stand out to you, particularly as being way above where you thought they'd be this year offensively?
Well, I just want to point out that Tulane has figured out how to score that many points, and yet Mario Williams has figured out how to be a total dud in that system. And I drafted a ton of that guy. And it feels like, look, Mekhi Hughes has done what we thought Mekhi Hughes would do, right? We've seen, Kamani Vidal, who is a preseason favorite of Debbie drafters and NFL Dynasty guys. Yep. But we saw him go ham in this system. So we knew that Mekhi Hughes could do that. But, to be this dynamic of an offense, or I should say score this many points, and yet have no pieces on the passing side of the ball that are scoring anything that's relevant in fantasy right now is quite impressive. So this is really just a therapeutic session for me to get out how frustrating it is to pick a team that's going to have a lot of points and yet still, fall for the Mario Williams trick again this year.
JD, any thoughts? Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to hit on Tulane as well. I think you were talking about it, Proton. The big takeaway for me is the factoring in conference realignment and how that affects the defenses. I think that was one thing I kind of missed. Now, I don't want to kick myself too bad for not drafting Tulane guys because it's just an ugly scheme and it's really nobody other than Hughes, like Josh mentioned. And then
maybe Dante Fleming a little bit, but it's catch as catch can. It's not consistent.
It is, and maybe best ball, but if you're picking some of these guys up, you're getting burned a little bit, right? Even Mensa had a few good games. He looked great against Kansas State, but he's throwing the ball 22 times a game. So
yeah.
But that's another one. But Navy, Army, let's be honest, who's really going to draft a ton of shares of these guys? Wouldn't be me, but I think that is the takeaway. So this is one thing I tried to prioritize in the past with Pac-12 teams, and just the defenses are not close to the offensive talent in that conference, and it's that way for a while, and you just had a lot of underrated assets and just juicy matchups with close lines and then totals that could just really, really rise up. So, but the Americans one that I didn't see quite as much. So shout out to Zach Hall and shout out to anybody who hopped on that, because I think that's the most underspoken part of fantasy. And then once it's fantasy season, it becomes, oh, this guy's playing North Texas, got to play him. It's well, we know who's playing who before the year. We may not have every single defense pegged perfectly, but Vegas lines are out earlier than ever, and totals are out earlier than ever, and these projections are out there now more so than ever. Some really good projections, so you can kind of see it coming. And that's one thing that I'm for sure going to pay more attention to last year. I'm kicking myself a little bit. So conference I targeted was the Big 12, and I think I did a decent job because those games shoot out a little bit because they're anybody can win any game. It's total chaos. Yeah. But even that, it's not the American. The defenses are just better than they are in the American.
Yeah, I completely agree. And before we move on to the passing and wrestling sections, why don't we take a quick commercial break? All right. Moving on to the passing offenses that at least I kind of didn't expect. We're going to go, straight to where we should be going here. And that's the Syracuse Orange. 349 passing yards per game for Syracuse. I didn't see it. I know we have a couple of the absolute elite college fantasy minds in the world here, but gentlemen, talk to me. Did either of you see this Syracuse 350 yards a game coming at us?
No, absolutely not. And if I just would have heard a broadcast where I was told that Kyle McCord knew these guys growing up in New Jersey, playing high school football, then I might have drafted more of Kyle McCord. But that didn't come till later. No, but yeah, look, last time we saw Kyle McCord, he could barely complete a forward pass unless it was to Marvin Harrison. And then all of a sudden, the guys just lighten it up. And, again, it's one of those things I did not see this coming in the passing, because even with Jeff Nixon at Baylor, feels like they spread it out so much. I mean, there's a few targets, but nothing like they've had 2 to 3 guys that are fantasy relevant every week in the passing game. And that's just bonkers to me. And so it's pretty impressive to me. What about you, JD?
No, definitely didn't see it coming. I'm with you. Yeah, my handicap on McCord is he doesn't look very good. People might think he's good because he's from Ohio State, but again, he just locked onto Harrison. Now he has no Harrison. How's that going to go? Which is the reason I kind of have a lot of Rondé Gadsden shares. It's like, well, I don't really see anything bankable here other than him checking down to LaQuinn Allen and then Gadsden being one of the best tight ends. And it's just been the absolute complete total opposite of what I expected.
Yeah, I don't feel bad looking back and saying I missed on Syracuse. Like you're saying, yeah, even Gadsden, though, I mean, has he been that much better than the average tight ends? He hasn't been Harold Fannin out there, dominating the world at tight end. So, I mean, for the amount of draft capital he had to expend on that, even though we're throwing for 349 yards a game, you're still not getting that ultra tight end one usage that you really were hoping for out of Gadsden. Some of the other offenses here, I will domino and we can pick apart one by one. 7th highest or most prolific passing offense in the country, San Jose State. Come on down with 324 per game. Top 10 offense. Didn't see that coming with Brent Brennan leaving and going to Arizona, but
and the new head coach coming in who ran the triple option the last time he was a head coach.
Wow. I mean, but yeah, here we are. Well, when in Rome, he had to do it. That was the role he was cast upon, but that's not what he wants to do. 14th, Arkansas. Taylor Green throwing for 292 a game. Obviously, Malachi Singleton takes over. He got banged up last game. Taylor Green did, which, I mean, that's kind of going to happen the way that he runs and is kind of a little reckless outside of the pocket, but still, it doesn't take away from the fact they're the 14th most prolific passing offense in the country. I didn't see Arkansas going for 292 with Sam Pittman, Bobby Petrino, or no Bobby Petrino. 17th, Pitt, Cade Bell, Kerwin Bell's son, offensive coordinator, just changing the entire dynamic of that team. And, the good thing about having Pat Narduzzi as a head coach is he could still pitch a D. Like, he's good enough where, they've run up-tempo offenses at Pittsburgh more often than not. And he's got a pretty good track record of defending that. 291 yards per game there for Pitt. Not a great game for our boy Ace Holstein last game. Yarnell threw 2 touchdowns in garbage time. I wonder if that's going to do something. 19th, Indiana. Once again, here we are, 284 yards per game. We already talked about them. Won't belabor that point. 29th, Cincinnati at 267 per game. Look, the Emory Jones Cincinnati offense was not throwing for 270 a game. We personally assure you of that. I believe they were barely squeaking out 2. I think he threw for like 2150 last year. And that, I mean, we talked about it last week. The Brennan Sorsby 2,000.5 passing yards preseason line was just an absolute layup. And he's already beat it. We're in week 11. And then lastly, Fernando Mendoza. Cal. 266, number 30 ranked passing offense. Justin Wilcox, defense. They threw a little bit under Musgrave last year, but they've really kicked it up. And even though they've lost a couple of heartbreakers down the stretch, Jack Endries, obviously friend of the show, been absolutely one of the best tight ends in the country. So out of those passing offenses, gentlemen, feel free to wax poetic about whichever one you'd like to discuss.
Yeah, I'll let you go first, JD.
Yeah, so I think San Jose State is another one. Like, I remember my handicap on the OC is like, okay, this guy's really interesting. I think it could be underrated. And then just diving deeper into it, like nobody returning. And then the spring reports were just totally brutal. Like, just sounded like the offense was I mean, it could average less than 20 points per game is what all the reports were sounding like. Which turns out just their defense is better than most of us gave them credit for, because their defense hasn't been that bad. And the offense is obviously way better. But like, yeah, it was like 3 quarterbacks vying for the job. None of them look good, throwing multiple picks in most practices. And that was enough for me to be like, okay, despite all that interest I had in OC, let me just totally throw out everything that I like. And that was not called for. I think the overall lesson is, especially when you're doing as many drafts as we do, is like, okay, you may not be sure on something, but you can still be sure, like, the offensive coordinator is interesting, because Pitt's the same way. Okay, well, clear interest in the offensive coordinator, but like, geez, the spring game was rough, and the quarterbacks look kind of rough, and are any receivers any good? And what it boils down to for kind of both these teams is like a similar lesson, in my opinion, is if you have faith in the offensive coordinator, you need to at least have some shares, because these guys are dirt cheap, and look where they are. Like, these are 2 top 17 offenses just crushing it. Guys like Desmond Reed, guys like Nick Nash, like just total league winners. So even if you're not an Andrew Katz and drafting Nick Nash in 10 of our 12 drafts or whatever it is he has them in, still make sure you add some, just not taking like total stands, like take more flyers, because some of these guys, people take flyers on, like, oh, Alabama, they have DeBoer, that could be good. Like, they're all the way down at 42nd in passing yards per game. Meanwhile, I mean, San Jose's throwing for 325 per game. So that was the takeaway for me.
Yeah. And like you said, Nick Nash, legitimate league winner, considering where he's been drafted. I mean, absolutely taking the top off the defenses. Josh.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another 2 teams I want to highlight are Maryland, with Billy Edwards coming in. We didn't know who was going to be the starting quarterback, but either one, I don't think we had on the bingo card at plus 300 passing yards.
No, I mean, most of us figured MJ Morris would end up beating him out because he came in and had experience for NC State, but nope.
Yeah. And so therefore, there wasn't a ton of people taking Ty Felton. JD, I think you were one of the ones taking him late, but no. Okay. So I don't know who's taking Ty Felton. Probably Andrew Katz, because he's whipping us all. But it's just crazy. I mean, Maryland being that high. The other one that's surprising on this list to me is UTSA. I mean, to see them there at 291 passing yards is pretty crazy. Also considering that against Power 4 opponents, they threw for 132 yards per game. So the games that I really got my eyes on were Texas State, Texas. When I was pumping up Owen McCown, I mean, he looked doo-doo. And then he comes back, and in every other G5 opponent, he's thrown for 317 yards plus. And it's like, it's just really interesting. I mean, UTSA is another system that we've trusted over the years, right, to produce. Maybe thought for a minute that it was maybe just Frank Harris, but it looks like, no matter whether it's Will Stein or, whoever's in there as the OC, they seem to produce prolific passing offenses.
Agreed on both fronts. All right. Well, in that case, we're going to move on to the rushing offenses that I feel have overperformed a little bit. And no offense to our boy Rich Rod, but hey, Jacksonville State, 3rd in rushing yards per game, averaging 270, a positively Service Academy level of rushing yards per game. Got to respect that. I'll go through all these and then you guys can go through you'd like. New Mexico, we've mentioned them before. They're up to 231 a game. Devin Dampier, all hail. 10th in the nation, a top 10 offense. All right. I mean, I know it's rushing, but look, just saying top 10 in offense with this team, I don't think anybody really expected that after the past 5 years of the Fredo Ferentz era, but here we are. Iowa, 222 yards per game rushing, 10th in the country. It was about time. Bye-bye, Brian Ferentz. Adios, buddy. All of a sudden, Iowa's out there scoring points. Like, it's amazing what you do when you just say no to nepotism. 12th, Oregon State. We didn't know we were getting out of them either. Jonathan Smith goes and hits Michigan State. Adios goes our boy, Damian Martinez, down to Miami. That prolific offense. We didn't know what we were getting. Was Aiden Childs and, Jack Felling going to be able to deal with this? Who knew, right? Oregon State, 217 yards per game rushing. They also lost Talisi Fuaga, a 6'9", 400-pounder over there at right tackle. I mean, everything, you cannot say enough about what they're doing in terms of that rebuild. Good on you, Oregon State. 15th, Marshall. let's give it to Marshall here. They were in pretty rough shape last year. I didn't know what we were getting coming into the season of this. They had retread NC State running back allegedly leading that backfield, and AJ Turner just said what we said all last year. We're taking the under on our boy there from NC State, and AJ Turner just has wrested control of that backfield. We have talked about it. I know JD did a couple of weeks as well. We've mentioned him, and then lastly, give it up to the Broncos of Western Michigan. 209 a game, 19th in the country. Jaden Nixon, go get yourself some, young man. In terms of pickups, I would say he's been a very important pickup at least halfway through the season, whenever you got him, and you've been able to start him. So those are a few of the rushing offenses. Feel free to go after it. Who wants it?
Yeah. So, I think when you talk about Oregon State, it's like, imagine Damian Martinez and this offense playing into this competition. I mean, oh man, that would have been crazy.
Probably would have helped him in terms of his draft stock too. I mean, obviously he's got a higher profile at Miami, but I mean, he would have been talking about Genty-esque terms potentially.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think you pointed out some really good ones, right? New Mexico, Jacksonville State, Trey Stewart in particular doing what he's doing, right? We didn't know who was going to be the guy. We knew that a running back should emerge in this system, but golly, what he's done has been incredible. I mean, again, this is another D2 transfer that transfers into a FCS program. I think those are the types of things we need to start looking at a bit more as far as analysts go. So that's a big one for me that sticks out here. And then look, AJ Turner coming on is great. South Alabama is another, to JD's point, right? You're talking about horrible, either scrimmages or spring scrimmages, and then they just come on and they look awesome. And we knew that offense had potential going in, but some of us started fading them. So yeah, those are the ones that stick out to me. And again, like Navy doing what they're doing to the degree that they're doing it, right? And Army too. I mean, we knew that this isn't surprising, they're top 5, but how it's happening is something that we've been hoping that they'd get back to so we could benefit from that. So yeah, those are the main ones for me. What do you got, JD?
Yeah, I think my overall takeaway is just teams that are true to their identity, even some of these despite offensive coordinator changes, despite personnel losses, because there's so much that we look into in the offseason, and there's so many teams, there's so many players. It's a lot to keep track of. So like even some of these that I've overlooked, like in my notes, okay, so for teams like, Notre Dame and Kansas State, my notes might say, well, they lost a ton along the offensive line. They have a new offensive coordinator. There's a lot that you might not like for normal teams. I think it's finding the balance of what is their identity? Is it a very strong identity? Was it their identity because of the personnel they had? Or was it the identity of the head coach? And is it something that's going to continue? So again, a team like a Marshall that says they're going to transition to the air raid. Well, okay, they're still running for 212, and their head coach is still Charles Huff, a former running backs coach who has shown he wants to run the ball. So things like that. Even the Iowa takeaway for me, because last year it was a similar handicap. They returned a ton on the offensive line, but the offensive line was bad the year before that, and it was the same thing going into this year. And it's like, well, it turns out, it was as simple as nepotism for Iowa. Even if they weren't effective years prior, they've still tried to establish the rush. And if there is improvement, this could happen. So I don't know if anyone quite saw a top 10 finish, but things like that is the overall takeaway from even teams lower down, like UConn's running for over 200 yards per game. We know what their identity is. It's physical. Their offensive line is always the best performing unit on the team. That's really what's sticking out. Jacksonville State, again, we'd be remiss if we weren't watching our Limestone College, our Limestone University, whatever is our Limestone footage to identify Trey Stewart. I didn't, but like, we know who Rich Rod is. We know what his identity is going to be. Just taking shots on teams where you're 95% certain what the offensive identity is going to be.
Yeah, and on the same token, on the other side of the coin, just for the rushing side, we didn't do it really for the other ones, but it needs to be said, Oklahoma State is 119th in rushing yards per game. They're rushing for 108 per game. I don't think anybody saw Ollie Gordon and the Cowboys here with Mullet Gundy ranking 119th, bottom 20 in terms of rushing yardage. So it goes both ways in terms of the surprise there, in terms of what these teams are doing. But that'll pretty much do it for that portion of what we're discussing here today. I will leave it to Josh, and we will take a quick commercial break before we go through the waiver wire.
All right, that was fun. That was fun looking back at the teams that surprised us, and then also to see kind of things that are going well. One of the things that just sticks out to me is a guy like Caleb Johnson, who flashed early in his career, then faded, and then obviously he's come back and had a huge resurgence. I just think that's happened a lot recently, where you're seeing these older guys or guys that early on maybe floundered out for some reason, but then come back and hit. And Cade Klubnik is another one, right? We all gave up on him, and then he comes back this year and has been unbelievable. And it's like, I wonder how many of these guys like Jackson Arnold or whoever, right, that's flaming
Jackson
out as
Arnold's
a sophomore.
a great example. That could definitely happen with Jackson Arnold in a couple of years.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of these sophomore QBs that could flame out, and then in a couple of years they're prolific again. Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix. You can go down the list of these guys that, like, you just give them some time. Like, their rating wasn't wrong, and if you just give it time, they can tend to hit if they get into the right system and people that know how to utilize their talents. And so, anyways, those things just stick out to me as like I should be, I shouldn't be quick to just throw people away and discard them, or even make fun of them in the moment because they're not performing the way that I think they should.
Well, and when it comes to our draft that we do with the Champions League that we talk about, you have to be careful after maybe draft 7 or 8, where everything is just so, all the ADP is starting to just kind of get really locked in and codified. And if you just sort of fall into that and you don't take the swings that you really could, maybe there's guys that you like, but you're like, this guy's ranked up. Take swings in those late drafts. Put some variance in those teams when you're doing the best balls, because you don't want to have just that same homogenized group, because there's going to be so many misses. Take some swings. But yeah, good call, Josh. And I will say, just before we move on, LaMarcus Peppermint, want to give a little shout out to the comment section here. Astutely points out, South Alabama, only team with 2 500-yard rushers. Great little factoid by Mr. Peppermint. Well done.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and this just reminds me, even getting into this waiver wire talk today, like, we're going to talk about some guys, and maybe there's some guys will be on here because of injuries, but a lot of these guys are these G5 guys that are just coming up late that we don't have as many eyes on as the P4, where people will typically go with what they know in drafting or acquiring through the waiver wire. And so it's interesting to me that stuck out to me. It's like, the guys that are left, a lot of them are these G5 guys. So let's get into that tonight. JD, let's start with you, and we'll do QBs, your waiver wire QBs for the week.
Yeah, so I'm keeping it a little brief, but I'm keeping it very brief. I don't have any QBs written down. So there you go.
We got you, JD. I can do
You
it.
got me.
Why don't we go with Dylan Risk? We all love the game of Risk. JD, as a teacher, as an educator, do your kids, are they fans of the game of world domination Risk as I was as a child?
I do not believe so. I think it's more it's Clash of Clans and Fortnite and Roblox.
A lot of Fortnite, right? Yeah, I actually dabble in a little Fortnite too. I know they just changed maps, but I'm terrible. That being said, you don't want to hear about that. Dylan Risk. We don't know what we're getting in terms of Gus Malzahn and Ja'Cory Brown and KJ Jefferson. It looks like KJ Jefferson's out of the mix. Ja'Cory Brown has pretty much spoiled the goodwill he had, and Dylan Risk comes in against BYU when they're down, hits 6 of 10 for 102 and a touch. He goes, gets the lion's share of snaps, 20 of 25 for 294 and 3 against Arizona. I mean, yeah, it's Arizona. but also ran for 55 yards on 9 carries. We know that any Gus Malzahn QB is going to be running as well as throwing the ball. I mean, look, if this is going to be, if he's won the job for UCF at 1% ownership rate, give him to me, because it's a kingmaker. Nick Marshall put up, good fantasy stats for him. We could barely throw in a forward pass 10 years ago for Auburn. Anybody who is Gus's quarterback, I want. We'll go with Zion Chris, QB Houston. We've heard about him a little bit. He's at 12% ownership right now, which is extremely low. And with Chris, we know what the deal is here. I mean, a really good running quarterback got hurt a couple weeks ago, which kind of, put him back on the waiver wire. That's why he's down at 12%. But, I mean, what do you want? You went 11 for 11 against Kansas State with 103 yards and a touch. But then on the other side, 75 yards and a rushing touchdown as well. I mean, if you're in a 4-point passing touchdown league, yeah, I know they're going to be running at a particularly, high clip here, and they're on bye this week. Dude, they got Arizona week 1 of the playoffs, which is week 12. So if you want to go and take a bullet and you're going to be hit by some of those buys, which I believe you got a Jackson Dart buy in there, you could do a heck of a lot worse than a little forward thinking and going with Zion Chris against Arizona. I think we all know, if you're watching the show, Arizona's defense, one of the worst, one of the absolute bottom of the barrel for fantasy purposes, which that's what we want. And then lastly, Bryce Archie. Archie! That's a little All in the Family reference. I know that is literally a show from the 70s. No, I wasn't alive to watch that. But Archie Bunker is a classic. We have to give it to him. Looks like he's taken over the job over there at USF for the deposed top 5 pick of USF, their Byron Brown, RIP. But, I mean, Archie started each of the last 3 games, thrown 41, 31, and 32 passes. So, I mean, they're out there gassing it up in this goalish system. 44-21, they beat on FAU last game. And we even were treated to one of the rare coaching blow-bys. Got a coaching blow-by by Alex Golich to Tom Herman. Nobody likes Tom Herman, apparently. My God. Gives him the old dusty finish right on the way out. It's a little wrestling term. But, with Bryce Archie being the conductor of that train, and as we've talked about, the AAC defenses are pitiful. You got Navy this week, of course, with that script and that run-heavy approach. But then 12, 13, 14, Charlotte, give it to me. Tulsa, as Zach Hall correctly projected, the worst schedule in the country. And then Rice. Like, dude, if you have some quarterback concerns or issues heading into this final stretch here, and you're going to be in the playoffs, you could do a lot worse than a speculative Bryce Archie pick. In fact, definitely take him in the 50-teamer. That's all.
Clint Carlson's got a question here. Any thoughts on Wyoming QB Caden Anderson? Last year, get 3 games against bottom 30 pass defenses, yards per game, but it is Wyoming.
Yeah, I definitely considered putting him on this list because he went out there and obviously last game he gave it to New Mexico because, I mean, New Mexico, are they a great offensive team? Yes. Are they a good defensive team? Oh, no. Oh, no, they are not. And that's what we like. But he threw for 340 against them. Game beforehand against Utah State, another not particularly good defense. He went 15-24, But I'd like to see him run a little more. Didn't run at all last game. But look, what are you going to do? How many starting quarterbacks do we have that just went out and threw for 340 and 3 last week? Not a lot. So at this point in the season, yeah, go get him. It's like unowned.
Yeah, that's good. I like it. A couple guys from me, just reminders. These are guys that were on buys last week, but have good matchups this week if you're hurting with week 11 buys. Caton Hauser from ECU. He's still only 8% owned. And he's got FAU this week and then Tulsa, UNT, and Navy over the last 3 weeks of the playoff stretch. And then Parker Navarro is 15% owned, and he has Kent State's defense this week, which they should be able to move the ball and score some points there. And then last one, Jalen Kitna from UAB. He's 1% owned. He just went ham this last week. So, yeah.
Yeah, I told you a couple weeks ago on Kitna. I hope you listen to me.
Yep. There you go. All right, running backs. JD, do you have any running backs, or is the sheet also blank there?
You better.
I have a running back. I was just noticing I was looking at my favorite waiver wire pickups of the year. I thought we were doing that. We weren't. So sorry. That's the notes I was looking at.
Oh,
but
that's what we're doing. Our favorite pickups. Oh, jeez. Yeah.
I do have.
My bad.
You're good.
Uh-oh.
I do have a running back I want to talk about. His name's Bryson Washington, one of the clear standouts, I guess surprise standouts of the week for Baylor. So this is a guy when you're talking about like guys that we liked at one point that maybe we gave up on, because I drafted him in quite a few supplementals last year. I believe it was last year he was out. I think he's a redshirt freshman. And then was like, okay, look, it's probably not going to happen because Pendergrass is an undergrad playing above him. Richard Reese is an undergrad playing above him. It's like, it's probably not going to result in bell cow status ever for him. And lo and behold, it is bell cow status. And he is rushing for nearly 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. And I'm like, dang it. Shouldn't have dropped him everywhere. Shouldn't have given up so quick. So a good lesson in humility there. Thank you, Bryson. But no, so the reason I kind of like this one, he's not going to go crazy like this every week, but we've seen this Baylor offense surprise. And it's a second straight year. Jake Spavital's done this. His Cal offenses last year with Jay Knott going berserk. Is Bryson Washington going to do that again? No. But are they going to run at a fast tempo? Yes. Are they going to be playing in these Big 12 games that are back and forth? Yes. Is he a good player? Yes. I mean, I think so. I liked him as a recruit, and obviously you got to like 4 touchdowns. So he's got to be buying in. And then I had one more that stood out to me, and this is going to sound a little odd, but I just couldn't help notice what I was seeing. We're heading on over to Northwestern with Joe Hyman. This guy has had some really impressive stats. And I think that's how you say his name, Hyman. But either way, we can call him Hyman because he is him. His numbers are impressive. He's got he's averaging 5.2 yards per carry, and Cam Porter only has 4. So we all know by now Cam Porter's just a plotter. This kid leads the country in breakaway percentage. He's a redshirt sophomore, so he's still got some extra years of eligibility. So this one's probably more so for the future, but he leads the country in breakaway percentage. You're like, okay, well, he's probably a scat back because he's like 189 pounds. But then you see he's 6th in the country in yards after contact per attempt. He's got nearly 5, and he's forced 15 missed tackles on only 44 attempts. So these are numbers that are standing out to me because, one, it's a small sample size. It could be a total wash. But if you look a little deeper, if you're that impressive, if you're the receiving back, so you have PPR upside, and you're breaking tackles like that, and you're doing it in an offense that isn't doing a whole lot. So it's not like you're just benefiting from wide open, gaping, or running holes to run through. Just a guy I thought I'd mention as really catching my eye that I didn't expect.
Yeah, I remember we talked about him after the Duke game earlier this year where we were like, man, that guy's popping off the film. So he's a guy, yeah, I like Hyman a lot. I just don't understand their usage of him because, look, when the advanced stats and the film match up, like that's usually a pretty good prospect. So I like that a lot. Proton, what you got?
Bryson Washington was one of mine, 20% owned, so I will skip on him. We don't know what's going on with Le'Veon Moss. He came out of last game, which allowed Amari Daniels, the RB2 over there at A&M, to really pick up the slack. I mean, he got 12 carries 2 games ago against LSU for 91 yards. Last game, 13 for 83 and a touchdown with a catch for 8 yards. He has had double digit each of the last 4 games. Gets a lot of carries on the goal line. Has certainly been used in that sort of capacity. But again, we don't know what's going on with Le'Veon Moss here. Will he be back? Will he be okay? I mean, maybe. But if not, we got to bye this week. But then week 12, first week of the playoffs, New Mexico State. If we have no Le'Veon Moss and they keep him under wraps for that game, you can see Amari Daniels just completely tear that New Mexico State defense apart before they have Auburn the following week. So if you have the ability to plan ahead a little bit, I think you could do a lot worse than picking him up. He's 8% owned, given the health of Le'Veon Moss. And my second one, Gerald Green, former Georgia Southern recruit, former 4-star running back, who I think was originally a Florida commit, tore up his knee and ended up in the Sun Belt. Now he's at Troy. Damian Taylor was the nominal number 1 we assumed would be this season. But, hey, Green's right there, too. They both had 100 yards last game. But Green, He's had at least 100 yards in 3 of the last 5 games, had a touchdown in each of the last 2, including 2 touchdowns last game. Where he caught an 83-yard swing pass for a touchdown, had 33 points last game, 18.5 the game before in a PPR format. I mean, that's pretty attractive. I don't know what more you want, but at 1% ownership, Damian Taylor's 8% ownership to Troy. It looks like they are certainly pressing the pedal on the run game this year.
Yeah, just real quick on Green, because he reminds me like what I was saying with Hyman was what I thought of Green before he tore his knee up, because the kid's metrics were always insane.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, he's in a weird offense, and then he tears up his knee and he keeps transferring. Well, like now that we're seeing it, I think it'd be a good time to buy in, especially at 1%.
No problems. And from a dynasty perspective, too. He should be owned everywhere from a dynasty perspective. Why not? What do you have to lose now at this point?
Yeah, that's a great point. A couple for me that stand out. These are either due to injuries or just have good matchups this week. Elijah Young, Western Kentucky, 12%. We've talked about him before, but he faces a New Mexico.
12% owned. That's crazy.
I know. New Mexico State defense he's facing this week. They're allowing 16 carries to 84 yards to opposing RB1s. That's 19.3 fantasy points per game per week. So that's a guy that you could pick up for the matchup this week. Eli Sanders, 8% owned. He just went bonkers last week. Look, they're just putting up points every week. So look, he could score touchdowns just because he's in the right place at the right time. And they play San Diego State, which can be tougher, but he could have some stuff. You had mentioned Amari Daniels. Le'Veon Moss is out for the year. So they announced that
now,
later.
Huh?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, boys.
Later this afternoon. So Amari Daniels is the guy. So Ricky Hunt, it looks like Anthony Tice is questionable to doubtful this week is what they said. He had 9 for 89 last game. He split carries with another back. But look, it's Kent State. They're one of the worst run defenses in the nation. And so Ricky Hunt, again, for this week, could be a good pickup. And then last but not least is Kyson Brown from Arizona State. He did some things when Cam Scatterbo went out this week. Cam Scatterbo is questionable, but he looks like he's probably more on the doubtful side of things. And who knows? I think Kyson Brown, he's got some talent. He's not Scatterbo, right? So you can't expect that. But again, a 1-week pickup. In a week that has a lot of buys, Kyson Brown could be a guy that you could pick up. Any thoughts on those guys? Yeah,
I was just say Kyson Brown. He's a guy that's like popped, and it's like, why isn't this guy getting more carries? I think he was banged up because like when Raleek Brown came back, I mean, I love Raleek Brown, but I was amazed he was like getting snaps ahead of Kyson Brown because weeks 1 and 2, I think it was the one they killed Wyoming. He got a fair amount of snaps week 1. I'm like, whoa, where'd this guy come from? And then gets like almost no carries, and then as soon as he gets more carries, he looks really good again. So he was one to definitely have my eye on. As like if he ever transfers or if he ever goes into more carries, I think he's a guy I would buy low on. So it could be the time now.
Yeah, Dillingham even said this week after his performance when Scatterbo went out, he was like, yeah, we got to get this guy more carries. Now that could have been because he knows he's going to get more carries this week.
Oh, he's got
Scatterbo out. But look, I mean, they're playing UCF, and there's going to be some points scored in that game. And I think that he can have success here on the ground for sure. And like, look, the kid is really good at catching passes out of the backfield too. So he's not just a runner. So you can do it a dual threat in that way. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll finish off with wide receivers and tight ends. All right, JD, we'll start with you with wide receivers.
Yeah, so Jacoby Jones. It seems to be kind of the theme of the week as these guys who like stood out to you once upon a time, guys that had really good metrics, but just kind of got forgotten about for one reason or another. The reason he kind of got forgotten about is he went to a non-prolific UCF passing offense, and he was transferring up in conference, and Kobe Hudson was there, and then 4 quarterbacks later, now they have a passing quarterback, so it's going to be a more pass-centric offense. And Jacoby Jones is just really good. Like the metrics have always said it, and he looks good. And is he going to keep going for 100 and a touchdown every week? I don't know, but at this point, his quarterbacks love him, and the metrics love him, and sure, they're going to operate fast. They're going to have a lot of plays, and we know the rushing attack is going to be good. So passing attack probably, knock on wood, get totally shut down because this happened a time or two this year. A young guy I want to point out, 2 young guys actually. Jordan Napier for San Diego State. This is a guy I tried to add in Dynasty a few places by now. So if he's available in your Dynasty, I would go take a look. He's a redshirt freshman, so still plenty of years of eligibility. But really upsetting, first off, that Jayshon Polk was knocked out after catching 3 passes early in the game when we had his prop overs. Very, very upsetting. But one thing I noticed is because Napier, I didn't start him in a few leagues. I didn't start him in the 50-teamer. But part of it was he's not quite playing a full-time role. He was playing about 30% of his snaps in the slot, and that's kind of where Polk has taken over, and they just don't always have 2 slot guys on the field, and he's not always on the boundary. But we don't know what the deal with Lewis Brown is. I know he has fans in the fantasy community. I'm not one of them. Will we see him again? Will they be an impact? I don't know. At this point, show me Lewis Brown. King Louis IV. But other than that, Jordan Napier, super impressive. He's looking good. And anytime he catches as a redshirt freshman to find the end zone, this offense is headed upwards. It was so bad to start the year. It's still Sean Lewis. They're still going to run fast. Somebody's going to catch these passes right now. It looks like Napier. And last one, I'll let you guys go a little more on him. I assume you might have something to say on this guy because he had 40 fantasy points. Is Cam Shanks, freshman at UAB. Guy before the season started, I said, this guy looks a little too talented to be playing in the American, especially at UAB. Seems kind of interesting. Foul that one away. And the next thing you know, he's catching a touchdown pass against Arkansas. And you're like, there he is scoring against SEC teams. And now here he is scoring 40 fantasy points. So I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. If this is going to be a big time dynasty asset going forward with Kitna or whether he's a weekly guy now.
Yeah, Cam Shanks. That was I first heard about him on the G5 Hive podcast where they interviewed one of the UAB beat writers, and he pretty much, put us onto that and just said Cam Shanks is the guy. Be forewarned, you need to have him. And I was like, ooh, damn, let's get us some Cam Shanks. Great tip out there. Well done by the G5 Hive. Also, wasn't aware. I always thought JD was a English teacher. A little King Louis IV there. Some history? Do you teach history all of a sudden now, JD? Are you just well-rounded? Well done.
Just trying to pull a Froton. You're just inspiring me. I'm trying to think of a nickname. I was being kind of
love it,
deprecating towards poor Mr. Brown there. So tried to call him a king and be a little nicer.
Oh, that was very kind of you. And the San Diego State in me, really appreciates that. I live a mile and a half from the stadium, so I'll let him know. That being said, JD, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you mention Isaiah Page?
I've mentioned him in previous weeks. Well, I mention an Old Dominion guy every week, but it seems I forgot.
Yeah,
so
it's
my chance to mention one. Isaiah Page.
Thank you. Good. I'm sorry. I was like, we're Old Dominion free. We didn't talk about him in the little section there. No Old Dominion. Let's correct that problem. Thank you, JD. My boy JD has mentioned him before, but Isaiah Page, I don't know what more you want from what he's doing over there in Old Dominion. Ricky Robbie, just bless you. 13 of 16 passes were secured for 205 yards and a touch last game. That's off of 7 of 7 for 100 and 6 of 13 for 36 the game before. He's just getting assaulted with targets here. I don't see what he is an easy call pickup. He's only 14% owned. Anytime you're looking at somebody who has gotten legitimately 36 targets over their last 3 games, they need to be on your radar. Isaiah Page. And I'll go with one more since I also had Jacoby Jones. You have to have Jacoby Jones at 2% ownership. You have to do it now. He's the number 1 at UCF. He's it. I'll also toss in at 1% ownership, a nice little flyer. Josh Dallas. Josh does Dallas over there at Georgia Southern. September 28th, caught 9 of 14 for 89, right? And then so had a couple of down games, but the last 2, October 24th, 3 of 3 for 90 and a touch against Old Dominion. And then last game, 5 of 6 for 96 and 2 touchdowns against South Alabama in a 34-30 victory. We know that Georgia Southern wants to throw. Preseason, Derek Burgess was pretty much considered to be the guy. Going in around round 6 to 8 is around where we're seeing Burgess going in our best ball drafts. He's been taken over. We also, in addition to Dallas, we had who was the slot receiver? His name escapes me at the moment, but
Dalen Cobb
had a lot of excitement about Dallin Cobb, and he's had a couple games. He was good last week, but look, it's Josh Dallas. He's overtaken both those guys. He's only 1% owned, and Georgia Southern throws. So those are my two faves with Jacoby Jones.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Here's one going back to an old well of ours, but Matt Sykes from Rice. Just a reminder that he's 7% owned.
Old friend. Yeah.
I know. Still 7% owned. He's averaging 10 targets, 7 receptions, 76 yards for 16.9 fantasy points. And he faces a Memphis defense this week that allows 9 targets for 5 receptions and 108 yards for 20.2 fantasy points per game. So look, like, pick him up. He should be on your squad if you need help at the wide receiver position. And as I was doing waiver wires even today, I was like, man, I was surprised at how many leagues he's actually still available.
Seriously. Well, because he's been up and down a little bit. Like, he had the first couple games were all right. And then he had against Houston, he was completely phased out.
Yeah.
But then he went and dropped 20, 17, 19, 14, 5 points against UConn 2 weeks ago, and another 23. It's almost like he's been very consistent in that high teens sort of a range, to where he hasn't had the 30, 40 point explosion to really put him on the map, which is why he's only 7% owned. But he gets those consistent targets every week in, week out. 10, 5, 9, 9, 14, 11 in terms of targets. I mean, double digits to double digits.
I think that's a good point too. And I think a reason that might be is a lot of these leagues, probably what a lot of people do when they go to the waiver wires, they just go and look at the last week's high scorers. And so if you're scoring 40 points like a Cam Shanks, you might be rostered. Whereas if you're Sykes and you're getting 18 consistently, whereas in my opinion, what I'm looking for in weekly leagues is who's scoring me 18 every week, who can I plug into my lineup?
Yep. And he's, like we said, at least 14 points in 5 of the last 6. What do you want? I mean, especially in the big leagues where you have deep rosters, and especially the deep starting rosters, sometimes you have 3, 4, 5 flexes in some. I mean, he's gold for those weeks because you're not going to get a blank out of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one other guy I wanted to mention was Nicholas Snockle from Hawaii. He's still only 2% owned. He had 14 targets this last week, 12 catches, 113 yards. They play UNLV at home. They're 13.5 point underdogs, so he should see a ton of targets. And it's interesting because the top wide receiver there, what's his name? Blanking on his name. Yes, Pofili Ashlock. He also plays in a slot with Sinocle, but honestly, his production's gone down as Sinocle's gone up. And so I don't know. I mean, I think that you should pay attention to that, and he's worth a dart throw if you need help at wide receiver for sure. Any thoughts on Sinocle? I know we've already mentioned him before, but just want to remind people when these guys are still out there that they should consider them.
Hey, that's what we're here to do. No problem.
I actually did have him written down, just because he had 14 targets. He's kind of a guy you've been waiting on. Like, the production's been okay. We know the system's good, but like, we haven't quite seen it. And I think now we've officially seen it. But and the Pofili thing is weird because I was under the impression it was a head injury and he had passed concussion protocol, which usually is kind of a back to normal, but it hasn't really been back to normal. It's a good job pointing out the usage has shifted for close to a month now. It hasn't been good sign for Pofili.
Yeah, Clint Carlson saying he took a shot in the head last game. Ashlock, maybe a second concussion this season. So good call, Clint. If that's the case, I mean, prayers up for Ashlock for sure. But it could be an opportunity for Snockle in that slot position. And that offense is one that is definitely CFF relevant. All right. We are down to the bottom of the barrel, tight ends, end of the year. We'll start with you, Froton. What you got, man? You got anything special for us?
Oh, I got something special for you. A hibby dibby, hip hip hopper. You don't stop a rockin' till the damn to the boogie. You up jump the boogie or the rhythm of the boogie to beat. A skiddly bebop, we rock a SMU. I got a tight end. His name is Matthew Hibner, and he rocks in a roll with so much soul. He's gonna rock until 101 years old. Matthew Hibner, tight end, SMU. We know that Russell Maryland has been injured. RJ Maryland. Russell Maryland is former defensive tackle. I'm sure he isn't playing either, but neither is RJ Maryland. And Matthew Hibner has stepped right into that TE1 role for a 7-1 SMU team that just went and took Pittsburgh to the house. Scored 48 points on him. Hibner had 3 catches for 108 and a touch. Game before that against Duke, his first starting game, he got 6 targets, caught 4 of them for 39 yards. The point is, he's being used. They use the tight end. Even though RJ Maryland isn't there, you're still seeing Hibner go for an 80-yard touchdown, all right, which Maryland was doing with regularity as well. At 0% ownership, I mean, you got to have a go at Mr. Hibner, have a go at that. Easy call. If you need a tight end, you just put up 20 points, and he's in a prolific situation. I've said prolific 3 times today. Drink.
I love it. JD, what you got for us?
I just want to shout out your call on Houston Thomas last week. That was a great call. I definitely thought about that when building DFS lineups, and you're looking at UTSA dirt cheap, and just Houston Thomas. There he is, 2 touchdowns. He's had great work. He's had double digits in 3 of his last 4. In the game he didn't, he had 9 fantasy points. So he's been an absolute stud. Joshua Simon, I want to shout out as a guy that's just looked really good to me this year, but the production hasn't really been there. And oh boy, has it been there lately. 14 fantasy points, 2 straight games, just blew up for 132 and 2 touchdowns. Is that going to happen every week? Probably not. But this, the fact that they scored 44 points as a team that usually can't throw the ball against an A&M defense that's nasty up front, like this was supposed to be a pretty down week offensively. The fact they scored 44 definitely has my attention, whether or not it's going to be consistent, of course. And then last but not least, I did have Hibner written down. So good call. He was my number 1 guy I had written down that I.
Were you going to wrap him though?
I wasn't going to do anything interesting.
Damn it.
No entertainment.
I'm glad I broke it out then. I'm glad we got a little bit of Sugar Hill Gang out of Hibner.
Yeah, I can't top that. So go with Protons.
Well, nobody knew I could rap. I mean, I can sing. I don't think that my rap bona fides have gotten out there yet. My flow.
The next Juice WRLD over here.
Jay doesn't even know what to say.
I do not. I have no game to spit right now.
It's not your
I do want to diss. I do want to diss Mr. Lane Kiffin. Okay, because I thought I had a really juicy FanDuel play with Caden pre-scoring at 1% ownership, going against a trash Arkansas defense, and he's off the injury report, and he's warming up. Fire him up with no Trey Harris. Fire up pre-scoring. Like, this is ridiculous. And then Lane got me. Not the first time he's taken somebody off the injury report and then they haven't played. So I think there needs to be some penalties. I don't know how we've not instilled that. If we have, it's not stopping anyone from doing anything. So I just want to shout out.
Went buck wild too. Like,
yes.
You deserved better out of that, JD. You really did.
The pain I felt watching Daquan Wright, the highest scoring tight end of the week, was at 2%. He's 2% on FanDuel. Good offense, fellas. There you go.
Oh,
hopefully we don't see pre-scoring again at this point.
Yeah. Daquan, not Mr. Right. Not last week. Sorry, buddy. Good call, though. You deserved it.
Yeah, that's brutal.
All right.
Is that a wrap? I got a quick little streamer. Tyler Neville from Virginia, 12% owned.
Friend. Look, old friend Tyler Neville. Welcome back, Tyler.
Yes, mentioned before, but he's playing Pittsburgh this week. And as I started looking to the numbers, they're allowing 15.8 fantasy points per game to opposing P4 tight ends. Their lowest output they've given up is 8.3 points. The other 5 tight ends all produce 13.2 fantasy points or more. And look, I mean, this UVA passing offense is struggling a bit. Could be time for them to go back to Neville, give him some looks over the middle. And if you need some help, I think he's a guy that could help you there. And he's probably available on the waiver wire after he's not done great in the mid part of the season. So yeah, I think that's it. That was fun. Froton, we got to clip that, get that on the socials. Your hip hop.
I hope so. Yeah, my first rap.
Yes,
my first rap on any of these. Yeah,
that was absolutely incredible.
But for Matthew Hibner, I had to.
Yeah, I love it.
He earned it.
We'll end with this. Oh, Brett, our boy Brett. Always, here to invite us into the show, and here he is sending us out. I appreciate you guys
Brett is
very
legit. We
much.
appreciate you, Brett. Absolutely. Brett's a good
Go
guy.
Muck Dogs.
Yeah. Appreciate all the guys, everybody who joined in and commented, of course. And I'm just glad that we're going to finally, if I can filibuster a little more for another 5 seconds, we're going to hit the hour mark that we've been trying to get to. And we got it. Yes. All right. An hour.
For the algorithm.
There we go. An hour. Has to go an hour. All right.
We kept the streak alive. All right.
We did.
Hey,
We've yet to go under.
All you guys know the drill. Yeah. Like, comment, subscribe, all those things. We love you. Until next time, do small things with great love.
What? Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.